Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation. Ultimately, looking for the right question to ask to stabilize what is sensorality. Conceptually, sensorality is anything that is censored. What is a sensor? What is sensation? There's clear linguistic use. If you look up the word censorship, it is spelled with a C. If I talk about my senses, it is spelled with an S. Inanimate objects don't have sensation in the way sentient beings do, and so we're trying to establish that difference linguistically. Ultimately, in doing so, we have to derive everything. Very literally, we've done that. And so ultimately, again, the derivation of an axiom is establishing a proof, establishes a fact. The derivation of an axiom establishes a fundamental physical reality, which is already there. Again, physics exists and we're just describing it. And so up until this point, we've done physics, right? What things are and how things move. And so we've pretty much categorized and described through derivation with appropriate proofs where necessary. And like any other derivation, any other proof, what happens is you just follow a line of questioning. Language is emergent from physical movement, thus it is a physical system. Theory versus experiment isn't a well-defined differentiation. And so historically, the big name in there is Socrates. You can have this line of questioning to arrive at fundamental truth. A lot of people throughout history don't write things down, and that's kind of why, because again, all of this logic is contained within words. And so we're showing this completeness to the linguistics, the letters to represent the sounds. So that is what we're doing ultimately. What is sensorality? Showing this completeness within language, stabilizing censorship, sensorality, as an axiom. What is a sensor? What is sensation? So on and so forth. But kind of the last big question, or at least the next question in this line of derivation that we've presented is, can you move backwards, right? We'll say, I just have written all movement is forwards. Right? So we have these things, they're moving, we've described that entirely. What the big ideas we need, right? Each independent object is in orbit. Right, I am Brad, I am on Earth. Earth is in orbit around the sun. That's why I'm orbiting the sun. All of the little electrons in my body that make up the atoms, they're orbiting the nucleus of their respective atoms. And so everything is in an orbit. Then on top of that, if it is rotating around an internal axis, it is spinning. And since all particles have spin, is everything spinning? Yes. And so it kind of poses the question again, which direction can you move? Because if you say, right, conceptually, hey Brad, I'm sitting down, but if I was standing up, move forward or backwards, right? I move forward and I move backwards. But in reality, or again, fundamentally, the reference frame is me. If I'm saying move forward, it's in reference to my orientation of my body. My face is to the front, move forward, I go that way. But in reality, again, force reciprocates. That's where we get for each action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. When I plant my foot and push, right, the earth is a lot more massive than I am, and I move forward in relation to my orientation. But fundamentally what I'm trying to get at is you only move, right, in the direction in which you apply force, right? And that's when you're calculating trajectories of motions in classical mechanics. You have we'll say the y dimension or the x dimension, but those are directions, and that's logically the x, the y, the Cartesian coordinates, those are directions, not dimensions. But you can only move forward. Of those objects that are in orbit, all of your movement is like, you have to have again, tangent. That's kind of like physically where tangents come from, right? Your velocity vector is always pointing tangent to the circle, the thing you're orbiting. And so the acceleration vector is always pointing towards the center, and the velocity is always perpendicular. And so forward is always, again, perpendicular to the thing that you are orbiting, or the thing that spinning or orbiting. Yeah, the thing that you're orbiting, just the center of your mass, of the system you're considering. And so point being is you can only move forward in the orientation. When I say forward or backward, again, it's the unique difference between 2 points is a line, and then really, again, three-dimensionally a geodesic. But there is that reciprocation of force when I tense my muscle, right? I have some internal tension, and then because that's the chronological piece missing from Newtonian mechanics, is, the force does reciprocate, But how did I generate that ability to push my foot against the ground in the first place? It's because I'm a system under tension. I have the ability to choose to flex my muscles, to create this spatial discrepancy, to create potential, removing mass from equilibrium, allowing it to move, tensing my muscle, expending that capacity to do work, that energy to move. And so directionally, we can only move forward, again, tangent to the center of mass or the thing that you are orbiting. And so, and then acceleration is the change of velocity. But again, that direction, the reason the momentum or you're always, again, you can only move along that tension path, so your acceleration is always centrifugal or centripetal, again, whatever the right one is for that. But again, we've derived that in the thing that Newton was missing there was this chronological aspect of tension, right? Systems have to get into some sort of discrepancy to be able to, or quote unquote, want to move. And it's overwhelmingly apparent linguistically, tension, tendency, right? This tends to do that. It's like the natural, proper logical form. And so that is a big step as well. Again, last time we covered the equivalence principle, because again, there's no chronology in the sense that, Newton was in the 1700s, Einstein's in the 1900s. 200 years is a massive difference. It's really just not, especially when it comes to fundamental physics, which hasn't changed for 10 to the minus, the early universe was 10 to the minus 36 seconds. So like the same physical properties have been around for quite some time now. And so again, does this, history is not linear, progress is not linear applies there, where it's not like the insight that Einstein had and the insight that Newton have, and using language to represent it, it's truly like, chronologically it did happen. Newton did come before Einstein, but the results are, again, fundamental physical results they were true 10,000 years ago, about 10 million years ago, 10 million years in the future. So it's consolidating the intuition, the correct aspects of all of these different facets where you've articulated things properly, right? Work requires movement, clearly articulated in mechanics. This inversion, recognizing energy as the inverse of entropy, which Einstein articulated as acceleration and gravity through the equivalence principle. It's all has the same level of relevance, irrespective of being the 1700s or 1903 or whatever. And so that is all movement is forward. And then I have force forward. Again, drawing all of these physical realities back to, again, language is a physical system. What other nuance can we draw from these geometric shapes, letters representing these processes? And so I have for is the opposite of from. Very clearly, or again, apparently, if you study another language, it's Spanish, de, de, is it from or is it of? But again, still now we had this big discussion of opposition and inversion related to chronology. We have to differentiate somehow. So now I'm kind of back in right? Because in math class, you clearly have inverses, and then, you have opposites. Conjugates are opposites, but, there's clearly inversion is used a lot more than opposition as like a function. And so trying to provide, again, any more logical insight to why. But I have for is the opposite of from, meaning on my personal level, it's kind of like I use opposite and inverse kind of logically interchangeably. There is a clear difference chronologically. We've gone through that as much as I can, but I do notice that I kind of use those colloquially a little more interchangeably. But I just point that out anytime to acknowledge, if you have something, light bulb goes off as I'm using words a little sloppier, I guess, but I'm just trying to work it through myself. For is the opposite of from. If something is for or to, right, it's at. If it's coming from or of, it's like removing. And so we have this, again, directionality very clearly apparent in prepositions. Go learn another language. What's the first thing that jumps out at you? The nouns, sure. Conjugation of verbs, sure. But ordering them, structuring them with prepositions is undeniably the clearest, thing you have to learn or get accustomed to when you're learning a different language. Because again, naturally, you just don't think about language structure that much because it is so reactionary. You're born into an environment where you're exposed to language and you just pick it up without really thinking about what's going on. But then again, force is obviously this word. Conceptually, theoretically, logically, you complete it by this irreducibility of two. It's pressure, force per unit surface area is a pressure, or force per unit area, I guess. I don't think you really need surface there. But is that like surface area, right? Where everything has volume to it. Everything is three directional. But force is clearly force forward. And so there's some linguistical consistency there. For is the opposite of from. And see how we like use of in there as well. But before we also said, I wanted to bolster, talk a little bit more about acceleration being like positive, like positively connotated. But appreciation, right? That's another word where if you have a stock, it appreciates. If you say colloquially, hey man, I appreciate you, right? That's positively connotated. And linguistically, appreciation, acceleration, it's the same form. Appreciation increases, sensorality appreciates. Sensorality is specificity. Specificality is specificality. Sensorality is specificality. Specificality is sensitivity. Sensorality is sensitivitality. Sensitivity is sensational. Sensorality is satiality. Satiality satiates. Satiality is sensorality. Satiality is sufficiency. Sensorality is sufficientality. Sensorality suffices. Suffice, vice. Sensorality is sufficiality. Sufficiality. I'm trying to generalize suffice. But then phonetically it produces sufficient again. Officiality is financiality. Finance is official. Again, taking you through, I'll put some of them on the screen, not sure how many, but showing you again, you can hear the bass jumping around, and I do that sort of just, you'll see them in my emails as theorem overloads, but it's just, like you just keep going on and on and on. It is finite, but it's so, you don't see the logical difference. I don't really point it out all of that much. But we've arrived at the word official, right? What is the relationship of special and official? Very clearly linguistically similar. Logically, right, is being official special. Oh, you're so official. You're a special person, right? Again, just building up the logic to show this fundamental differentiation. What is sensorality? The direct iteration of those letters. Finance is official. What is official to special? Sensorality is officiality. Sensorality is add a space of officiality. What is of to? What is of to from? Because remember, all of these logical exhaustion, we are constructing every question you can have to represent a moment of intuition. Actually, like literally. And these prepositions are like the big things. Where does sense come from? What is a verb tense, right? What is conjugation? We have an infinitive verb and we conjugate it. The conjugation is definitive to a subject, but what is then that produces a verb tense, or is conjugation tensing, right? We have past tense, present tense, future tense. We don't really. We have this fundamental stability of two. We have things that are in the past that are set, things that are in the future that have not happened yet. We have a language construction where again, if you have something in the past, you use the word have. Like I have, or I had something, or I will have. Right? We use this will in English or like será in Spanish or French even. And so it's just like, how do we, like, what is a verb tense is not, we have present, future, and past tense. No, we don't. It's just that, just no. But again, this process of going from an infinitive, non-distinct verb to indicating a subject, which then we need to have completeness or agreement between the verb and the subject. And so with this agreement, like what is this? It's some sort of consistency, grammar, right? What is this structure? What is grammar? What does it look like in practice? Because this conjugation conjugating a verb creates a verb tense. And we don't have past, present, and future. No, just stop with that immediately. But kind of this last thing where we keep saying in verse is serve. Logically, on a personal level, that feels like, again, we have to do something with the word serve. But I just have tense and serve, and then verse and tense. Just what kind of relationship are we drawing through there? Again, ultimately, again, showing this direct iteration of the letters. And that will be elicited by asking the right question. Aversion is resistance, right? Mass is resistance. Censorship resists. Resistance censors. When I drop my notebook and it hits my thighs, the notebook doesn't quantum tunnel through my thighs. It resists. Mass is censorship, physically, literally. Resistance is challenging. Adversity, aversion. What is completion to depletion? Right? We're trying to solve sensorality with a C. This section of language that is absolutely complete, said in the past, describes something unique, physical. It's a sensor. What is it? It's a filter. Show that iteration, and then we're done. But I've already done this. Speciality with an ITY is the completion of that process. We had some other word form, I think. I could literally Google it in like my own emails in like 2 seconds, but there's no point for this current derivation. And if you want me to do 360 backflips, might as well do 360 backflips. But there was some aspect of that we completed that said, you know, speciality is special with an ITY. That is literally direct. You can't say that's no. But it's, again, it axiomatized speciality as the tendency to differentiate for sexual antagonism. And so we're trying to do that process with sensorality, but you can't speed up a physical proof because it's the demonstration of a limit. So I'm just providing as much insight as I can, as I say all of the time. Completion to depletion, right? If you deplete something, you take it away. If something is completed, logically you can't deplete it. And so we're again focusing on this chronological aspect of logic. These prefix and suffix, how do they evolve to represent this inversion, opposition, difference process? What is completion exhausts? What is the opposite of exhaust? I guess you could say the inverse, or again, this is where it's like, is fuel the inverse or the opposite of exhaust? Again, whenever you come to something, it's one and the same thing, right? Exhaust is entropy, right? Fuel is the potential for movement, right? So I would say, like, I wrote the word opposite there, but I would say, you know, fuel is the inverse of exhaust. But see, that's what I'm trying to say is, like, after exhaust, like literally your exhaust pipe, the back of your car, that stuff, that hot air coming out, what's the opposite of it? And again, we're just trying to pose this question that elicits the right language to solidify sensorality. What is conjugation to tension, right? Now again, even generalizing a passive verb tense, tension clearly is overwhelmingly linguistically apparent, physically apparent. And so what is the general relationship of conjugation to tension? Trivial, but both end in ION. Again, solving some of these things in complete generality. Trouble is a problem, right? Problems are wrong. There is no logical inconsistency. There are no paradoxes. There are no contradictions. You have to find the right question to ask to answer a question completely. Rhythm maximizes order. Entropy minimizes order. Right? Last time, again, kind of a trivial restatement that rhythm maximizes efficiency. Efficiency is built on order. And so, again, trying to show this fundamental opposition or inversion or something to break away from sensorality is, use up all of those letters, and then the leftover letters, the exhaust, the remainder, will be the new word form to iterate through our next physical axiom. But the inverse of a maximum is a minimum. Again, a rederivation, because remember, we're tightening up all of this logic, but all of the big times when we first realize this are the big green letters, which has been a lot. There's been a lot of huge progress every single time we sit down and make one of these videos. But in general, the inverse of any maximum is a minimum. Entropy is the inverse of energy. It's the same thing, the capacity or inability to do work by moving. And so that is where we're at for today. That is what I have for you today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.